Casual Birder Podcast, a weekly podcast for people interested in wild birds. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I try to find time to watch birds as I go about my daily tasks. Join me each week to hear about the birds I've seen, interviews with others, and stories from listeners around the world. This week, I take a walk in the grounds of the Vyne, a National Trust property near to where I live in Hampshire, give an update on my garden bird count, and share some bird sightings from listeners. I started the weekend with my count of the birds visiting my garden, but more of that later. The weather was due to become stormy later that day, but the sun was out and the sky was blue, so I decided it would be a great day to take an autumn walk at the Vyne and see what birds are currently there. The Vyne is a former Tudor palace and has a range of birding habitats that are ideal for a weekend stroll, including a walled garden where you might see robins, blackbirds and blue tits, lawns dotted with large trees leading down to a lake where you might see jackdaw, goldcrest and various ducks, wetlands with a bird hide, and woodland walks. And you can also visit the magnificent house. I've come out for a walk at the Vyne National Trust property. It's a mixed weather autumnal day. I'm in the walled garden right now and there's a jackdaw right next to me. And I can hear some long-tailed tits. So the weather's changeable. It's forecast for rain today, but I've got all my waterproofs on, so if you hear some rustling, it's the waterproofs. So this time of year we can have quite a range of weather, from beautiful blue sky days with warm sun to really stormy, windy, rainy days. Today promises to be a bit of a mix. There's some blue sky visible at the moment, but there's grey cloud and it's forecast to rain in about an hour or so's time. So we'll see what birds we see. There are some gorgeous coloured trees around. So it's getting greyer and greyer as I walk along, looking out over the wide lawn, and there's quite a few jackdaws there. I think one's burying a nut. And I've just left the people behind who are going to the house today to walk across the lawn and see what water birds we have around. I can already see two mute swans resting on the bank. I think they're snoozing. One of them's just woken up. There's a lovely range of trees, lovely range of colours, some really red ones. I think this one might be a sycamore that's near me, and it's a lovely mix of reds, oranges and yellows, and still some green. On the river I can see a little grebe, two little grebes actually, a pair of mallards, and closer to me I've got three tufted duck, one male and two female. Oh, actually I have a lot of tufted duck. Turns out they were all under the water when I looked. So there's a large group of tufted duck here. Both birds have a lovely yellow eye. The males have head, breast, shoulders and back in black. They have white patches along the side and dark tail feathers. So they look mostly black with a golden eye and white sides. And they also have a palish beak. Females are much more brown all over. The sides aren't white, they're a sort of pale brown. And they're brownish all over the head and back and tail, where the males are black. And then just swimming past right now are some gadwall. The male has a black tail, or a black last quarter, some lovely brown long feathers on the back, very mottled breast and soft grey sides. And as they get closer, the sides aren't just soft grey, they've got lots of beautiful markings. And the females could be mistaken for mallards. I think I'll have to look at a mallard to see a difference. Okay, so I'm heading down towards the hide now. You can hear the mallards again laughing. So the mallards are bathing here. And because they are so common, I think we overlook how beautiful they are. When the sun hits the green on their heads, it's really metallic looking.
So, having seen both gadwall and mallard females, I looked at my Collins bird app to work out the differences between them. The male mallard is very identifiable as the classic duck pond duck. It has a green head, white collar, brown breast and back, a patch of purplish blue feathers on the wing bordered in white, and a black tail with curling tail feathers. The male gadwall is mainly brown with a white square patch on the wing, black rump, and long brown feathers on the back. Usually the female will be associating with the male, and this can help the identification, as male mallards and gadwalls look quite different. But if female ducks are alone, it gets more tricky for the novice birder to identify them. Both are similarly sized, although the gadwall is slightly smaller than the mallard, and they have mainly light brown plumage. When seen in the water, the key things to look for are beak colour, wing patch and tail colour. In female mallards, the beak is orange with an irregularly shaped blackish middle, or culmen. In gadwalls, the beak has an even orange stripe along the edge. Mallards have a purplish blue wing patch, or speculum, with a white border, whereas gadwalls have a white speculum, although this can sometimes be difficult to see. Finally, the mallard has buff white outer tail feathers, and the gadwall has darker brownish tail feathers. I'll put a comparison picture in the Casual Birder Facebook group. I'll be visiting more wetland areas over the winter, so I shall do my best to learn these three differences and see if I can successfully identify future birds that I see. I headed down into the hide to see what birds I could see across the wetlands.
So I'm in the hide, looking across the lake. The sun's providing quite contrasty conditions, so the water is very bright, and the birds I can see are mostly silhouettes. However, scanning along, I can see a group of gulls. I think they might be lesser blackbacks, just because they have quite dark wings, but not black wings. And I saw a flock of those here earlier in the year, but I won't say for sure that's what they are unless I can see that they've got yellow legs, and at the moment all the legs are in the water. There's a couple of ducks on the far side. The male has got cinnamon coloured sides with white patches and a green or dark head.
These were northern shoveler, which I also saw here earlier in the year. Shoveler are so called because they have a long, broad bill.
There's two herons just standing on the bank on the far side. They're large enough. Oh, there's one closer. Oh, there's a couple closer. It's a large flock of birds flying over, I think. But the lapwings, fantastic. There must be about 20 or 30 birds there. So they've all landed now. And the rain's hit. So I might sit in here for a little bit longer, because it's going to be pretty heavy. During the rainstorm, I have been able to spot that there's a little flock of teal at the side of the water. Teal are a duck with quite striking colours when you can actually see them. They were silhouetted earlier. They've got quite thin beaks, a mustard yellow rump with a black undertail, grey backs and sides but with a white horizontal stripe. And they have a whistle. You might be able to hear them in the distance. They've got cinnamon coloured heads with a green band that runs through the eye down to their neck. Very pretty birds. Obviously a little bit shy. They aren't on the river where the mallards are. They are on the back pond, which is quite some distance from the hide.
I had to stop recording there because there started to be a continual stream of people using the hide. It was a convenient shelter from the rain. While I was in the hide, a local naturalist, Doug Kelson, arrived. He was really knowledgeable about the birds we could see on site, and he had great tips for places to see specific birds in the region, and I took a lot of notes. Some of my memorable moments while sitting in the hide. A large flock of grey-legged geese flew in, which I was able to video. The flock circled the lake 3 times, honking all the while, before settling on the water. I saw a small group of teal displaying. They have a very unusual way of lifting their heads and then lifting their tails out of the water, while simultaneously stretching their wings to show off the green flash of feathers. I posted a short video of this online. Another moment with the teal. On the far side of the lake, I saw lots of splashing and I thought birds were bathing. But intrigued by the amount of splashing, I looked through my binoculars and saw the teal were bathing, but also seemed to be chasing each other, launching themselves partially in the air and crashing back down into the water. At times, they appeared like stones skimming the surface. I've decided that teal are one of my favourite ducks, and I look forward to seeing more of their behaviours during the winter. I mentioned last time that I've started regularly making a count of the birds in my garden for the BTO Garden Birdwatch. I've chosen to do my count at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. This week, my count for half an hour from 8 o'clock was 1 chaffinch, 2 dunnocks, 1 house sparrow and 1 robin. It was frustrating because there were plenty of other birds around, just not in my garden, so I couldn't count them. Visible on the rooftops were 4 wood pigeon. I heard a jackdaw, blackbird and collared dove flying over, and also 2 magpies. Because I normally have far more species in my garden, I continued my count on from 8:30. And in that half hour, the 4 wood pigeons had decided to fly into my garden, along with 2 collared doves, 2 blue tits, 2 dunnocks, a greenfinch, 2 house sparrows, and the red-legged partridge. Of course, that count was just for me and won't be entered into the official statistics. I love hearing your bird stories and sightings. Stacey, from Rough Giraffe Podcast, sent in a recording about the behaviour of some Eurasian jays in her garden.
Hi Susie, this is Stacey from the podcast Rough Giraffe, and I'm here in Reading. Now, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I noticed Kipper the wonky cat was shouting at something in the garden whilst he was sitting on the living room windowsill. So I had a look, and there were 2 Eurasian jays hopping around on top of the greenhouse. Now, I'm not quite sure what they were after, but they seemed to be hopping around the door of the greenhouse. And all I can think of is that inside the greenhouse, well, we have some rotting tomatoes. I'm not sure they're after that. But we also have the biscuits that we put down for the hedgehog. Now, these biscuits have a few little mealworms in with them, and I wonder whether they're trying to get in to get the mealworms. They were around for about 10 minutes, trying to give it a good go, but even though the door of the greenhouse is open, they maybe couldn't negotiate their way in and would have got a bit panicked, I think, if they were inside there and not able to get out. So they've gone now, but I've just noticed a magpie fly just into the tree above the greenhouse, and I wonder whether he's having a look too. Anyway, it's time for breakfast, says Kipper, and we'll keep an eye on it throughout the day. Thanks, Susie.
I wondered if they could smell the hedgehog food, and the same for the magpie. So I asked Stacey whether the jays were making a lot of noise or just intent on investigating the greenhouse. She said they weren't making a noise. One jay was very much preoccupied by the greenhouse and was investigating it all over. He was especially excited when he found the open door, but he couldn't negotiate a way in. And the other one was watching from the fence next to the greenhouse. He would stay for a few seconds, then fly off and return, over and over again. Thanks so much for sending that in, Stacey. It's really interesting to hear about these behaviours. And do check out Rough Giraffe Podcast if you'd like a naughty comedy trivia podcast. Lorne from London sent in a recording of an owl that she heard. She has heard tawny owls quite often where she lives, but she wondered whether this one was a little owl. Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with owl calls, so I sent this off to the British Trust for Ornithology, and someone there identified it as a tawny owl. Thank you very much for sending that in, Lorne. It is still a tawny owl, but keep your ears peeled and maybe there's some little owls around. Alan from Savannah sent in his bird sightings for the weekend. He saw 1 female cardinal, 4 mourning doves, 6 chipping sparrows, 2 tufted titmice, and house finches, and a bird with a yellow breast and a solid black head. He said it had a beak like a titmouse, and thought it might be a mourning warbler. Do let us know, Alan, if you see it again, and if you manage to get a positive ID on that. Listener Andrew Weidman lives in Pennsylvania. We'll be hearing more from him in a future episode on owls, but this week he wrote to say, "At the moment, I'm in Dublin, listening to the wind drive the rain. My wife and I are thoroughly enjoying our visit to Scotland and Ireland. While in Scotland, I was fortunate enough to see and photograph some blue tits, great tits, coal tits, I think, nuthatches, wood pigeons, ravens, crows and magpies, along with some small sparrow-like birds. I've no idea what they might have been. I also saw many gulls and gull-sized wading birds with longer legs and long downward curving beaks. They were mottled brown and buff. I don't believe they were ibises. Curlews, maybe? And so far in Ireland, I'm seeing many gulls, crows, ravens, magpies and wood pigeons. I'm amazed at how much larger wood pigeons are than rock doves. Also, I realise that magpies are considered pests and nuisances, but I love their jaunty attitude and their coat and tails appearance." Thanks so much for writing in, Andrew, and giving us an update on that. You mentioned the little brown sparrow-like birds, and I wonder whether they might be dunnocks that you're seeing. And the brown and buff bird with the downward curving beaks, I think that most likely is curlew. NL, a listener from Australia, posted some photos in the week of a channel-billed cuckoo and said, "A channel-billed cuckoo I saw today in the parkland close to where I live. These birds migrate to Australia in our spring from New Guinea and Indonesia. They lay their eggs in the nests of magpies, currawongs and ravens. They are the world's largest brood parasite, being around the size of a raven. Many years ago, I heard a horrible screaming outside my house that sounded like a child had fallen over and hurt itself. When I looked out, it was a young channel-billed cuckoo on the power lines, screaming to be fed by a couple of overworked magpies about a third of its size. That's so interesting to hear about the other types of cuckoos that there are in the world. Thank you to everyone who sent in their sightings and recordings. I'd love to know what birds you've seen this week. Join our Facebook group to discuss this week's episode, or post your photos of the birds you've seen. I really do enjoy hearing your tales, so come and join the conversation there. Find us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Birder Podcast. Follow me on Instagram at Casual Birder Podcast or on Twitter at Casual Birder Pod. And you can email me at casualbirderpod@gmail.com. Thank you to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeve Shirt by the Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at www.dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder Podcast.